Speaker.
I call Alistair Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to speak for the first time on this bill, and I'm very pleased to support this bill. I will also reflect on some of my experiences that I've had, like the previous member, in the town belt. But first of all, I'd like to reflect on just the aesthetics of the town belt. You know, we all fly into Wellington regularly, and on a blue sky day, coming across the, is it a horseshoe-shaped harbour, or is it a lagoon-shaped harbour, or is it, what's the shape of the harbour? It's a round, beautiful round harbour, and it's a crescent-mooned harbour, and it's framed by this U-shaped, rather than horseshoe-shaped. That must be a debating point. I'm going to call it a U-shaped green belt. And despite, and you're absolutely right, that is a debatable point, because when one looks at a map, it isn't quite U-shaped. It's a bit of a mishmash, but let's just agree, more or less a horseshoe shape. So, Mr. Speaker, coming across and landing in Wellington Airport is always a pleasure on a blue sky day, and as we know, on a windy day, which is often the case, it's maybe not such a pleasure. But can I say that the aesthetics of the town belt is something to be cherished. I'd also like to reflect on, this is, you know, maybe not a unique situation, but certainly an unusual situation where a community can add green space to an already green space, the 120 odd hectares that's in addition, in a capital city of the world. It must be quite an unusual situation that we find ourselves in. And I'd also like to reflect and acknowledge a few people. And to start with, I'd just like to mention John Ward, who's was the company secretary of the New Zealand company, who had the foresight to set up this, what was a 1,500 odd acre town belt, and said that, and he said at the time that it should be public property on condition that no buildings be ever erected upon it. Now, of course, with hindsight, we know that that was not the case, but nevertheless, that man had huge foresight, really, understanding that this was going to be a major city, not the capital at the time, but a significant city, and that green space was important. Green space was important for the social makeup and benefit of the community. So reflecting on that man's foresight, at this point I'd like to acknowledge Grant Robertson's foresight and acknowledge his initiative to ensure that this green belt, and give me a sec to pick up the words, is managed and, let me just give me 2 secs, is managed, protected, managed and enhance the town belt. That's what this bill does, Mr. Speaker, and secures that town belt. And I suggest that foresight is similar and reflected on the same sort of foresight that John Ward had so long ago, back in the day. Back in the day, there's no date. You'll have to help me out here. Probably 1871 or so. So a very unique and unusual situation we have here, and thanks to Mr. Robertson's foresight, we are here today at the third reading of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I didn't really appreciate the town belt as a teenager. I was a student at Wellington College back in the day, and was using that town belt regularly. Well, we had an unusual physical education teacher, and his name, well, unusual in that he created a whole lot of cross-country champions out of Wellington College, and believe me, I was not one of those cross-country champions. His name was Brian McRae. He was also unusual in that he was a founding member of the all-star Good Time Bulldog Band. Absolutely, and he was a tough guy, always carried around a cane, with him, but he made us run from Wellington College down to the Basin, all the way along Adelaide Road, up Ridderford Street and Constable Street, which we're now back in the green belt of Mount Vic. We're now back in the green belt, and along Alexandra Park, and then back down what we called the Gutbuster. It was called the Gutbuster, which sort of cut through Wellington College and Wellington East, right between. If you know the place, it's a real steep climb going in reverse, which is what you got if you argued with the guy. You had to climb this thing. It was called the Gutbuster. And of course, I didn't know that I was walking across quite a unique green piece of dirt. You know, this piece of dirt, this town belt, which until today was at risk. You know, was at risk of continuing to be eroded by those people who had managed the town belt since the early days of John Ward. So of course that's one of the things that I participated in the town belt. Of course, there's always Mount Vic, the top of Mount Vic. Now, how many of you are going to admit to being parked up in a car at the top of Mount Vic at sunset? How many people are going to admit to that? It's a beautiful sight with a special person in a car at the top of Mount Vic. Beautiful sight, looking out across Wellington City on a sunset. You cannot beat it. Now again, this whole experience is now protected because of the actions and initiative from Mr. Robertson. So for generations, people can continue to enjoy the Mount Victoria green belt, whether it's in the day running or whether it's in the evening in a special place with a special person in a special car. The other part, of course, is that is often used is, although not part of the town belt, is really it may as well be as, of course, the botanical gardens, and that is a place where a lot of people get a lot of use, not the same use, but a lot of use, a lot of cultural use, a lot of reflection, and a lot of exercise. And I'm not going to ask for hands who goes running through any part of the green belt on a regular time, but Mika Whaituri's mentioned that she uses it a lot. I use the Botanical Gardens and the Thorndon Hill. It is a fantastic place to exercise, and it's really not very far from here, members. Let's hope that this bill encourages us all to participate and use the facility that is right on our doorsteps. So, Mr. Speaker, it is a wonderful place. It is a wonderful place. I will continue to use my time that I have to promote and exude the enthusiasm that I have for this fabulous place, this fabulous town belt, this fabulous city. The framing that it does accentuates. I mean, just imagine on. Well, it's a beautiful colour, because when you're looking from here, how many of us have sat somewhere in this building looking out across the Thorndon Hill and contrasting those deep green colours of the native and the darker of the pine with the beautiful blue of Wellington sky that only Wellington can produce on one of those blue sky days that we've had, it seems, endless days like this, isn't it? Endless days where one has been able to enjoy this town belt. Now, I can't count on two hands. It's more than two hands worth of times that I've enjoyed the town belt this summer and this early autumn, going into winter. Now, on a winter's day, it's tough to enjoy, but I will continue to use that. And on the back of that final comment, thank you, Mr. Robertson, for your contribution, and I commend this bill to the House.